Frank's Tribute is the 16th episode of the 3rd season of Everybody Loves Raymond. This is directed by Will Mackenzie. And as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. This is a really solid episode with some really beautiful and some really emotional moments. It starts off with Ray and Robert at Marie and Frank's, and we find out that Frank has won Man of the Year at his lodge. It's not a surprise because, as Marie says, they don't surprise the Man of the Year anymore. That's how they lost the last Man of the Year. And Marie tells Robert and Ray that they have to organise everything because she doesn't want to do it. Neither does Ray, but he does end up going along with it. Frank then comes into the kitchen, and it's great to see him feeling really proud of himself and really happy and definitely milking it, such as referring to his chair as the chair of the year. But I really enjoyed that, and I think Frank in this is such an interesting character. He's always really interesting. But here we have different sides to Frank, which I love. Ray and Robert then go down to the lodge, and they try to film people saying nice things about Frank. Unfortunately, nobody has anything nice to say. In fact, some people have some really horrible things to say about Frank. And they managed to get some footage by asking people what they think about chocolate. And they edit together a very, very short tribute of people saying nice things about chocolate with Frank's name edited in every now and then. It's quite funny. It is definitely very funny. But Frank is upset because it's not a sufficient tribute. And initially, he is upset at Robert and Raymond. But when they get home, Marie points out to him that the reason he feels this way is because nobody at the lodge had anything particularly great to say about him. And Marie can tell he's wounded, so she's actually being really nice to him. And that's really lovely to see. And Frank asks her, what would you say in the tribute? And Marie gives this lovely little speech. And the words, he's the one for me, really got to me. And this is because usually all we ever see is Marie and Frank bickering. And we know that they do this out of love. It's their love language. It's how they communicate. But to have Marie every now and then actually just confirming the fact that she does love Frank is so lovely. And Frank was genuinely happy as well. And then Marie asks Frank what would he say about her, and he doesn't play along. She gets really irritated. And she says something that is true and I think really important to think about, but also quite hurtful for Frank. She says, you offer them nothing. You have to give love to get it. And I think that that's really important. I think that's a really great quote. But it's also kind of harsh for her to be pointing out to Frank that actually people don't like him. And this is why. And it's not so much that I don't think she should have said it, but at the same time, I don't like to think that Frank behaves that way, even though we know he does. And then she said something that it stung. For me as a viewer, it stung, so it must have really hurt Frank. She said to Frank, you push us all away. You don't have to push anymore. And she walks away. She does then briefly come back again, and we lift the mood slightly. But there was something about that particular quote that felt too realistic and hurtful, and it was uncomfortable, but powerful and very well done, but definitely painful. Frank then ends up falling asleep in front of the television. He wakes up and he goes to bed, and I think this ends up being one of the most beautiful scenes in Everybody Loves Raymond, because he lies down and Marie sits up and says, we're going to talk about this. And we get some more comedy there. She has a face full of face cream, and Frank's response was brilliant. And Frank ends up walking away very briefly, and he's clearly gone to the bathroom at the side, and he comes back and starts wiping Marie's face. And it's so loving and gentle, and he compliments her in a very frank way by saying, I like you better without the crap on your face. And it's so beautiful. And that got to me as well. I thought it was a really lovely moment. We then cut to Ray and Debra. I was slightly concerned we were having an episode without Debra, but thankfully that didn't happen. And Ray is feeling really bad about the tribute, so he calls Frank, and we are aware that Marie and Frank were getting a little bit busy. And Frank starts to shout at Ray down the phone. And we then cut to Frank and Marie having a lovely cuddle. And we end with the line from Marie, "Sometimes I wish they didn't live across the street." Oh, the irony. It's beautiful. It's a really lovely episode. It's not the easiest to watch because obviously we love Frank, and to see Frank feeling quite a lot of different emotions is, on the one hand, beautiful. It reminds us he's human, but at the same time, quite difficult to deal with. And Marie does have quite a lot of harsh things to say to him. True things, but the truth hurts. But the moment with Frank and Marie in bed together, Frank tenderly wiping the cream off of her face, it's beautiful. That moment, and Marie saying, "He's the one for me," I just thought were gorgeous. Genuinely getting a little emotional. Beautiful, beautiful episode. Difficult to watch at times. Don't like to think of people not liking Frank, but it's understandable with often how he behaves. But either way, Frank's tribute is a really lovely, very moving episode.